Welcome to Revenge Report. Don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe for more. Let's dive in. I stood at the entrance, watching the security guard hesitate as he scanned my ID. His fingers twitched over the scanner, then lingered, and I knew exactly what he was seeing. My sleeve tattoo. The hawk, wings spread, clutching a lightning bolt, the symbol of the unit I once led. A Black Ops rescue team, now a relic. My father, General Howard Kane, had nothing but contempt for what it represented. He stormed out of the building, his sharp steps echoing on the concrete. "What the hell are you doing here?" he barked, voice booming across the quiet parking lot. I didn't flinch. I couldn't afford to. "I'm here for work," I said, quiet but steady. His eyes narrowed, scanning me like a threat. "You don't belong here. Never did. That tattoo," he jabbed a finger toward my arm, "is a lie. You never led that team. You're impersonating them." The guard froze, caught between the power of a board member and the strict rules he was supposed to enforce. His eyes darted between my father and me, unsure how to proceed. I held my ground, watching the tension escalate. The moment was teetering on the edge. My father's voice rose, words sharp. "You're a fraud. A damn fraud." I didn't respond. I didn't need to. My silence spoke for me. My posture, firm, controlled, kept the moment from blowing up. Then, just as it seemed things might spiral, Marcus Doyle appeared. He wasn't supposed to be here, not at this hour. But then he never followed rules like anyone else. He looked at my father and said, "She let us." His words cut through the air like a blade. The tension snapped. The guard, visibly relieved, nodded and stepped aside. Doyle didn't offer my father any more explanation. He didn't need to. I didn't realize how tightly I was gripping the strap of my bag until I pulled my hand away. The weight of it still hung on me. That damn tattoo. The hawk and bolt. Even after all these years, I could still feel it burning into my skin like it was fresh. Bolivia. I had been leading an extraction. A high-stakes op, way off the grid. The intel was rock solid. Or so we thought. But the ambush came without warning. A wall of fire from every direction. Gunfire, grenades, screams. The whole team scrambled for cover, but it was too late. Doyle, Marcus. He took a hit, a bad one. Orders came through the comms. "Pull back, get to safety." They told me to leave him. I heard it clear as day. But I couldn't. I couldn't leave him there. Not after everything we'd been through. I'd seen him go down, but I also saw that flicker of life in his eyes when he saw me coming. That look. I couldn't just walk away. I pushed through the chaos, ignored the bullets whizzing by, and I dragged his ass out of there. We were both lucky to get out alive. The mission was a failure. We lost more than we gained, but we got him back. And when we made it back stateside, when the dust had settled, the survivors of that op, all 5 of us, went and got the same ink. The hawk, the bolt. No one asked for it. No one made us do it. We didn't want the glory. Hell, we didn't even want the recognition. But we needed something, a bond, a promise, a way to remember the ones we couldn't save. It wasn't a statement, it was a scar, a silent acknowledgement of the cost. And it meant something. It still does. I flexed my arm, my sleeve shifting as I remembered how my father had looked at it the first time. "Gang branding," he said, his tone dismissive, like it was some kind of joke. He didn't even look at the rest of me, just the ink on my arm. His eyes narrowed, his jaw tight. "You're sabotaging your reputation with this nonsense." I didn't flinch, didn't back down. "It's not nonsense, Dad. It's who I am." His face twisted in disgust. "What, you think you're some kind of hero? That's not how it works. That tattoo's a mark of failure. It's divisive. It's dangerous." "You don't get it," I said, my voice rising. "You weren't there. You don't know what happened." I tried to explain, to make him understand that the tattoo wasn't about ego. It wasn't about boasting. It was about lives saved, about responsibility. But every word I said hit a wall. Every time I tried to explain, he just shut me down. He shook his head, walking away from me like I was beneath him. "Women like you take risks you don't need to, and you'll pay for it one day." That was the moment the fracture happened, a deep, silent break that I could feel spreading between us like a crack in glass. It wasn't just the tattoo. It wasn't just the mission. It was everything I had tried to prove, every step I took that pushed me further from the path he thought I should follow. He never saw it as duty. He never saw the lives saved. He only saw a daughter trying to be something she wasn't, something he couldn't understand. And maybe he didn't want to. Maybe it scared him. That day, he walked away, and I realized that was the last time we'd ever see eye to eye on anything that mattered. He couldn't see me as anything but a failure, even though we were both survivors. I couldn't change his mind. And I don't think I wanted to anymore. The incident at the gate didn't die down quickly. It spread like wildfire through the company, winding its way through security footage, internal chats, and whispered conversations. By the time I made it to my desk, the damage was done. The younger employees couldn't stop talking about it. Some saw me as a legend, the woman who had defied her father, who stood her ground against a general in front of a crowd. They whispered in the break room, asking each other if they could get the full story. They were curious about the tattoo, about the team, about everything. Others, though, didn't want any part of it. They'd turn away when I entered the room or shuffle quickly past my desk, eyes glued to their screens. The tattoo had a way of isolating me, even when I didn't show it. It was a symbol of a past they didn't understand and maybe didn't care to. I kept my sleeves down and I kept my head down. I wasn't here for the drama, I was here for the job. The only thing that mattered now was the work. Doyle updated the consulting schedule that afternoon. He handed me the new assignment without fanfare, just a quick look that said everything. Lead the system's resilience segment, he said, his voice steady, no questions, no explanations. I nodded, grabbing the materials. It wasn't a promotion, but it felt like recognition, and that was enough for me. I didn't need a parade or a pat on the back. Just give me something to do, something I could control, something I could be good at. When the time came, I walked into the conference room. The silence hit me first. Every eye in the room followed me as I made my way to the front. Some faces were neutral, others guarded, but all of them were watching, waiting. Maybe they were hoping I'd say something about the incident. Maybe they expected me to address it. To explain myself, I didn't. I set up my presentation, I flipped open my laptop and went straight to the first slide. This is what we're working with, I said, keeping my tone calm, direct. Let's focus on what's next. No mention of the gate, no mention of my father. Just the work. I moved through the slides with practiced precision, showing them the systems, explaining how they could improve resilience across multiple layers. The room quieted as I spoke, the tension slowly dissipating as they realized I wasn't interested in their judgment, only in the task at hand. The last thing I needed was a spotlight. And the last thing I was going to do was let this incident define me. I kept my voice steady, answering questions with sharp precision. One of the younger engineers asked a question about the scalability of a particular model. I answered it in detail, moving to the whiteboard to break it down further. Another senior consultant challenged one of my assumptions, and I countered with data from the last quarter. I didn't back down, didn't blink. I just worked. By the time I wrapped up, there was no applause, no acknowledgement, just a few nods of approval and a couple of lingering gazes that I ignored. The air was thick with expectation, but it wasn't mine. They were waiting to see if I would crack, if I'd fall apart under the weight of their eyes. I didn't. I walked out of that room just like I had walked in, steady, controlled, focused. I didn't need their approval, I just needed to get the job done. And that's exactly what I did. I didn't expect the call. When my phone buzzed with the private number flashing on the screen, I knew exactly who it was before I even answered. Lydia, my office. Now. The tone was sharp, clipped. No pleasantries, just command. I didn't hesitate. I grabbed my bag and walked out of my cubicle, every step a little heavier than the last. The executive lounge was as pristine as always, too clean, too polished, like it was designed to make people forget that it was really just a place for old men to play politics, the kind of place I'd never belong. But tonight, it was my turn to be summoned. He stood by the window, staring out over the city, hands clasped behind his back, the familiar stance of a man who thought he controlled everything. When I stepped inside, he turned slowly, his face tight with something I couldn't quite read. Still chasing shadows for applause, he asked, his voice cutting through the stillness. The jab was thinly veiled, but it hit like a punch. I didn't rise to it. The only thing I'm chasing is the job, not your approval. He snorted, walking to his desk and dropping into his chair like it was the throne he thought it was. That tattoo of yours, he said, his eyes narrowing, it's divisive. You've made it a symbol, Lydia. You've made it all about you. I leaned against the doorframe, crossing my arms. It wasn't me who made it a problem. You did, The moment you decided to confront me in front of the whole damn building. He stared at me, his jaw tight, and for a moment I thought he might snap. But instead, he shook his head, like he couldn't quite believe we were still having this conversation. That tattoo is dangerous. It represents a past that doesn't belong here. It's not a symbol of duty. It's a mark of arrogance. I didn't flinch. I could feel the old anger rising in my chest, but I shoved it down. I'd been here before. I wasn't going to lose control now. I uncrossed my arms, stepping closer. It's not about arrogance, Dad. It's about lives. The lives we saved, the ones I couldn't save. That tattoo is a reminder, not for me, for everyone who was there. He snorted again, dismissing me with the flick of his hand. Women like you don't understand the weight of responsibility. You take unnecessary risks. You think you're invincible. Not invincible, I shot back, voice steady but sharp. Just willing to step up when no one else will. Some risks are worth it. Some are just about doing what's right, even if it means putting yourself in the line of fire. That's courage, not recklessness. He looked at me like I was speaking a foreign language. Courage, huh? You think that's what it is? You think you're the only one who ever had to make tough choices? I never said that. I held his gaze, feeling the weight of every unspoken thing between us. But I've seen it up close, Dad. I've made those calls. And I'll do it again. If it means saving someone else's life, I'll take the risk. He opened his mouth like he was going to say something, but then stopped himself. The frustration was clear in his eyes, but so was something else. Something I couldn't place. Maybe regret, maybe fear. Either way, he didn't argue anymore. I took a slow breath, standing tall. I'm not asking for your approval, never have. But you need to understand. That tattoo, it's not a choice. It's the price we paid, every one of us. He didn't respond right away. Instead, he just stared at me like he was weighing something heavy in his mind. When he finally spoke, his voice was quieter, though still edged with something I couldn't quite read. I don't want to see you ruin your life over this. I'm not ruining anything. I turned to leave, not waiting for him to respond. But you might be ruining yours by never letting go. I didn't wait for him to answer. I left without apology, without a word more. I didn't need his approval. I never had, and I wasn't about to start now. I was grabbing coffee from the break room when I ran into Randall. He wasn't someone I'd planned to see. A retired technician from my father's old unit. He'd been with the company for decades, and though I didn't know him well, I knew enough to recognize the quiet air of someone who had seen far too much to be fazed by much. He was leaning against the counter, looking down at his mug, the worn edges of his face softened by time. He looked up when I walked in, and something flickered in his eyes, like a memory he didn't want to relive. Lydia Kane, huh? His voice was rough, gravelly, but not unkind. I remember your father talking about you. I stiffened, instinctively pulling back. What about him? I asked, keeping my tone neutral. Randall chuckled dryly, taking a sip of his coffee. He wasn't always the way he is now, used to be on the front lines. He didn't back away from anything. His eyes narrowed slightly. Except that one time. The mission in the Pacific. That one changed him. I raised an eyebrow. What happened? He took another slow sip, then set the mug down, his fingers drumming on the table. It was a mess. We were supposed to extract a high-value target from an island. It was a nightmare. We got pinned down hard. 2 men died under his command that day. He was the one in charge, the one calling the shots. I could feel the weight of his words, each one sinking deeper. What happened to him after? I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. Randall's gaze grew distant, like he was looking back through the years, trying to piece together something too painful to touch. He stopped trusting the front lines after that. Took him out of the field, put him behind a desk. Said it was for good reason, but we all knew. He was done with it. Done with being responsible for lives. I swallowed, trying to keep my emotions in check. My mind raced through the fragments of the man I thought I knew. My father had always been distant, always been in control. But this explains so much. The way he never let me get close to that world, the way he seemed to fear it, fear what I might have to do. He never really came back from that, Randall muttered, more to himself than to me. He kept his distance after, from the team, from the action, maybe even from you. I could feel the room spin, though I stayed still. This wasn't about me, not really. This was about him, my father, and what I had been too blind to see. His fear, not of me, not of my failure, but of reliving his own. I stepped back, pulling my hand through my hair. I wanted to say something, something to ease the pain that was gnawing at me now, but I didn't have the words. I only had the understanding that it wasn't hatred that drove him. It wasn't disdain, it was fear. Fear that if he let me step into that world, I'd end up just like him. Fear that I'd make the same mistakes. And for the first time, it all made sense. The dismissals, the cold silences, the constant pushing me away. He wasn't rejecting me. He was trying to protect me in his own twisted way. I didn't know how to feel about that. It didn't make the hurt go away. It didn't excuse the way he treated me all those years. But it gave me a piece of the puzzle, a piece I hadn't even known I was missing. I thanked Randall and walked out of the break room, the noise of the office closing in around me. I needed to be alone, needed to process. But I wasn't angry anymore. I wasn't even disappointed. I was just tired. I found an empty corner of the building, far from the clamor of phones and meetings. I sat down on the cold floor, pulling my knees to my chest. I didn't cry. I didn't even feel like it. I just sat there, letting the weight of what I'd learned sink in. It didn't make anything easier, but now I understood why he'd always been silent, why he kept everything locked up. And that, at least, was something. The post showed up out of nowhere. I should have known it was coming, but I was still caught off guard when I saw it. A comment from a junior analyst buried in a thread about company uniforms and professional appearance. He wasn't even talking about me directly, but everyone knew who he meant. Unauthorized displays of tactical ink undermine professionalism, he wrote, and just like that, it was like throwing a match into a gas-soaked room. The thread exploded. At first, it was mostly the younger crowd, some calling for policy change, others just wanting to join the latest gossip. But then the senior staff weighed in. The tone shifted. People were split, half saying tattoos didn't belong in this kind of environment, and the other half standing up for them. The debate was as heated as it was pointless. I didn't respond. I never did. But I could feel the weight of it all, the eyes that were on me even when I stayed quiet. Everyone had an opinion, and all of them thought they knew my story. One comment from a senior analyst stood out. She's flaunting it for clout, trying to make herself a legend. That one stung, but I didn't show it. Let them think whatever they wanted. The discussions went back and forth for days, boiling over into meetings, whispered conversations in the hallways. There was no resolution, only more noise. The whole damn base was buzzing, and none of it had anything to do with the work. But Doyle. Doyle posted one reply, short and simple. He didn't pick a side, didn't offer an explanation. He just wrote, "Some memories must be kept so we don't forget who came back." That was it. No more, no less. His words hit hard, and the conversation didn't die, but it shifted. Some departments saw it as an act of favoritism, others saw it as the truth. I watched the whole thing unfold, standing on the edge of it all. But I stayed out of the way. I wasn't interested in arguing or defending myself. Let them buzz. Let them talk. In the end, it didn't matter. They didn't know anything about the people I'd saved or the ones I'd lost. But as the dust settled, I did my job. I mentored the younger employees who came to me for guidance, quietly teaching them how to manage pressure and take responsibility without getting swept up in the noise. I didn't give them lectures about courage or duty. I didn't need to. I just showed them how to handle it, how to keep your focus in a world that doesn't always make sense. I was still the same person I'd been before all this blew up, still carrying the weight, still standing tall. It didn't matter what they said or thought about the tattoo. I was here to do the work, and that's what I did. Doyle called a roundtable for all the junior and senior staff. No surprise there. He knew the heat the company was feeling after the tattoo debate. It was the kind of move a leader makes when the air's thick and something needs to be said, even if it doesn't fix everything. I was invited, but not spotlighted. I sat off to the side, just another participant in a conversation that was going to get messy. The room was packed, full of faces I recognized from both ends of the office spectrum. Some I'd worked closely with, others I barely knew. The table was a mix of personalities, engineers, analysts, legal, HR, and the ever-present chaplain and psychologist, both of whom had become regulars at these kinds of discussions. Doyle stood at the front, calm as ever, and began. "Today we're going to talk about symbols," he said, his voice steady, cutting through the murmur. "About legacy, about what we wear and why. Tattoos, patches, all of it. We're here to discuss what it means to belong to a team that deals with high stakes, high risk." He glanced briefly at me, and the room went silent. "Let's start with you." he said, motioning to the junior analyst who had started the fire on the message board. The analyst, a young guy, probably just out of college, shifted uncomfortably. "I've been thinking about this a lot," he said, clearing his throat. "The tattoos, the patches, they're divisive. We all know that. It's exclusive. It sets some people apart, makes it look like others don't belong, and that creates problems. It creates favoritism." He looked directly at me, his words sharper now. "Especially when someone like her is allowed to walk around with that visible symbol and get special treatment." The room shifted uncomfortably, but Doyle didn't let the tension fester. "Lydia?" he said, inviting me to respond. I didn't hesitate. I knew where this was going. "Equality is the floor," I said, my voice calm but not meek. "Excellence is the ladder. Symbols must match behavior, not ego. If the tattoo means something to someone, it's not because they want to flaunt it, it's because they earned it." I could feel everyone's eyes on me, but I didn't let it throw me off. "But if you're more interested in how it looks than what it stands for, then yeah, it's just a symbol. Nothing more." The young analyst shifted in his seat but said nothing. I knew that look. He wasn't going to back down, not now, but I didn't care. His problem was with the symbol, not the reality. And that wasn't something I was about to explain away, not to him. The chaplain spoke next, his voice low but steady. "Symbols," he began, "are important. For some, they're anchors in a sea of chaos. They represent something we can hold on to when everything else is falling apart." He glanced at me, then at the others. "It's not about exclusion, but about remembering the sacrifices made, the people who carried the weight alongside you." The psychologist nodded, chiming in. "And in high-stakes environments, these symbols help form cohesion. They bond people together. It's a shared experience, not just something you put on your body because you think it's cool. It's about survival." Trust, she paused, letting that hang in the air. "But it can also trigger PTSD. Sometimes the mark, the memory, becomes too much, and that's something we need to understand." The legal advisor, who had been scribbling notes, now leaned forward. "We also need to consider how this plays into our corporate policies. The visibility of these symbols might be perceived differently across departments, but ultimately, it's about maintaining a professional image. We have to balance the personal and the professional." There was a long pause after that, the room turning inward as everyone processed what had been said. For a brief moment, it felt like the weight of the debate lifted, like everyone was starting to understand something they hadn't before. The room wasn't so tense anymore. It wasn't that we all agreed, but we were listening. We weren't just fighting for the sake of fighting. Doyle nodded slowly, his eyes scanning the room. "I don't expect everyone to agree," he said, his voice low, almost reflective. "But I do expect us to recognize the value of these symbols, not just as decoration, but as a marker of who we are and what we've been through. Let's not forget the reason we carry them, the reason we earned them." There was some muted agreement, some quiet murmurs from the senior staff, but the younger ones were still processing, still figuring out where they stood. I didn't expect any big changes in policy after this. But the culture? That had shifted. Maybe not drastically, but it had moved. The meeting ended, and as people began to filter out, the chatter was softer. Less judgment, more reflection. I didn't need to be the one to change anyone's mind. But I could tell the difference now. There was less heat in the air and more room for understanding. I was running a routine network sweep when the alarm blared. It wasn't a standard alert, not the usual minor issue that could be fixed with a few clicks. This was different. This was deep. I ran the diagnostics again, but the results were the same. A backdoor had been implanted in the system, deeply buried, hidden from the usual scans. I could feel the blood drain from my face when I recognized what it could do. Real-time troop data, movement, location, mission specifics, all at risk. My hands moved faster than my thoughts as I flagged the breach. I didn't have time to double-check the protocol. I hit the emergency response button, sending the alert straight to Doyle's office. He was there within minutes, his face grim as he scanned the screen over my shoulder. "Shut it down! Lock the system down now!" His voice was already cold, efficient, no time for pleasantries. I began initiating the lockdown, fingers flying over the keys, the weight of the moment pressed in. The backdoor had been active for hours, maybe days. If it had triggered, it would have exposed critical data to the wrong people. This wasn't just about security, it was about lives. The door opened behind us, and I didn't have to turn around to know who it was. His footsteps were too familiar, too commanding. My father. He stepped into the room without a word, eyes immediately on the screen. I knew the tension was there between us, but this wasn't personal. This was business. Without a word, he reached into his jacket and pulled out a small device, an old legacy security token. It hadn't been used in years, not since he'd moved out of field work. He slid it into the terminal without hesitation, his hands sure, almost automatic. I glanced up, but there was no time for anything but work. "You still have clearance to those systems?" I asked, trying to keep my voice level, even though the pressure was mounting. He didn't look at me as he worked. "I never lost it." His voice was clipped, no room for argument. Doyle nodded. "We need to get the system locked down fully. Lydia, keep monitoring the breach." I watched the terminal as the lockdown protocols engaged, the screen flashing as systems went offline one by one. I wasn't sure how much of the malware had already siphoned off before we hit the kill switch, but we couldn't waste time wondering. Every second was critical. "We're shutting down the access points," I said, eyes locked on the monitor. "This should stop the leak, but I need a full system scan to confirm it's completely closed." Doyle was already moving, pulling up additional diagnostics on his own screen. My father didn't speak, but his hands moved quickly, placing commands with precision. It was like watching someone who knew the system better than anyone, like a part of him had never left the battlefield. He was sharp, efficient, still the man who used to lead teams under pressure. And for the first time in a long time, I could feel the rhythm of it again. The coordination, the unspoken understanding. We were working as a team, just like we used to. The last command ran. The breach was officially shut down. We'd done it. We'd stopped the leak before it could trigger a major breach. For a moment, everything went silent. The tension in the room hadn't broken, but the threat was gone. Then, without a word, my father turned to leave. But as he passed by my chair, he placed his hand on the back of it. A brief, firm touch. It was the closest thing to an acknowledgement I'd received from him in years. He didn't say anything. He didn't need to. The gesture, small, silent, carried more weight than any apology he could have given. I sat there, still staring at the screen, trying to grasp what had just happened. The breach had been averted. The data was safe. But that moment between us, that was something else entirely. It didn't fix anything. It didn't change the past. But for the first time, I understood. It wasn't about winning. It was about doing what had to be done, even if it wasn't easy, even if it didn't feel like it should be enough. And that was something, at least. It was late. The office was empty, the hum of machines the only sound left in the building. I had just shut down my terminal when the knock at my door caught me off guard. I wasn't expecting anyone, least of all him. I opened the door to find my father standing there. He wasn't in uniform, just a plain jacket, a far cry from the polished general I'd grown up with. He didn't say anything at first, just held out an envelope, its edges worn, like it had been sitting somewhere untouched for a long time. He didn't make eye contact. His face was unreadable. I took the envelope, my hand still as I looked at him, waiting. But he didn't speak. He just nodded once and turned to walk away. His footsteps were heavy but steady, the kind that made no noise, like he was trying to leave without drawing attention. But I knew exactly what was in that envelope before I even opened it. I shut the door and sat down at my desk. The paper was thick, the kind that carried weight. I slid my finger under the flap, and it tore open. Inside was his Navy Cross, the medal that had never been given to me, the one I'd always known was just a piece of the history I had never fully touched. But there was more. An old photo, a younger version of me, standing at the doorstep of my training facility just before I left. My face was still raw with uncertainty, but there was a fire in my eyes. I didn't know it then, but I was already carrying the weight of everything that came after. I flipped the photo over. My father's handwriting, so familiar and yet distant, scrawled across the back in a sharp, almost desperate stroke. "Make sure what you've done is never forgotten." The words were simple, a command, but they felt like something more. A quiet acknowledgement, maybe even a blessing, given in a way that felt strange to me. He didn't say anything else. He didn't have to. I held the medal in my hand, feeling its weight, the history behind it, the legacy it represented. My father had placed it in my hands, not in some grand ceremony, but with the kind of quiet respect I never thought I'd see from him. It was his way of saying that he saw me, that he recognized what I'd done, not with speeches or apologies, but with this quiet act. I looked at the photo again, the young version of myself frozen in time, unaware of everything that would come, of all the lives I would touch, and all the ones I would lose. The room was silent, save for the faint beat of my pulse in my ears. I could feel the wall that had been between us for years begin to crack. Not fall, not completely, anyway, but crack, just enough for me to see the cracks in his own armor. The part of him that had carried the same burden, the same memories, even if he'd never said it out loud, even if he'd tried to shut me out. I set the medal on my desk, the photo beside it, and sat back in my chair. It didn't change everything. It didn't fix the years of silence or the way he'd distanced himself. But for the first time, I understood something deeper. He wasn't just giving me the medal, he was giving me his legacy. Quietly, without asking for anything in return. He wasn't proud, not in the way I had always hoped he would be, but he was acknowledging me. For once, it wasn't about what we didn't say. It was about what we did. I ran my thumb over the edge of the medal, and for a moment, I felt the weight of both our histories resting in my hands. I didn't have all the answers. I didn't know where to go from here, but I felt something shift in me, something that didn't make it all easier, but made it possible to stand in the silence between us. I didn't ask for an apology, and I didn't need one. This was enough. I stood in front of the new cohort, sleeves rolled up, the hawk and bolt tattoo clearly visible. The room was quiet, all eyes on me. They didn't know me. They didn't know the weight of that symbol, but they would. I took a breath, letting the silence settle before I spoke. "I'm not here to tell you how great I am," I said, my voice steady, cutting through the quiet. "I'm here to tell you the truth. About a mission, about a team, and about a promise." The room listened, tense but not yet understanding. I led a rescue operation in Bolivia. We had solid intel, but it was a trap. We were ambushed, outgunned, outnumbered. Some of us didn't make it out. One of my teammates, Doyle, he's with us here, he was hit bad. I went back for him, even when they told me to pull back. I didn't leave him there to die, I couldn't, but we lost people. People who trusted me. And one of them, as he died, he said something that stuck with me. I paused, feeling the weight of the words again. He said, "Don't let them forget us." I let the room sit with it. They needed to hear it, to feel it. This wasn't some heroic tale about bravery or glory. It was a reminder of the cost, of the lives we carried with us. "No one's ever asked me about that tattoo," I continued, "and I've never made anyone ask. But it's not a mark of glory. It's a mark of duty, of responsibility, of remembering the ones who didn't come home." I let that hang in the air, letting them absorb it. They weren't going to clap. They weren't going to cheer. That wasn't what this was about. But the weight in the room? That was understanding. A quiet respect for the lives that were given up so we could walk away. When I finished, there was no applause, no fanfare, just silence. Some of the younger ones looked down, probably thinking about the cost they hadn't yet seen. Others looked at me like I'd just handed them a heavy burden, but one they were willing to carry. Afterward, one of the junior analysts spoke up, his voice hesitant. "Would you do it again? Knowing the cost?" I didn't hesitate. I knew the answer. "Yes," I said, "because some marks aren't to show off. They're to remind you who didn't get to come home." The room fell into a heavier silence, the kind that makes you think, makes you question. And in that moment, I realized I wasn't just teaching them the technical stuff. I was teaching them something deeper, something that couldn't be taught in manuals or slideshows. That night, I went back to my desk. I opened the drawer and placed my father's Navy Cross beside a folded sketch of the hawk. It was from the sibling of one of the teammates I had saved. The sketch had been tucked into an envelope after the mission. A thank you, a recognition I had never asked for but would always carry. I shut the drawer, the weight of both the medal and the sketch sitting in my chest. The fight between silence and memory hadn't ended. It wasn't over. But now, I walked with both stories in my hands, my own, and the one my father had tried so hard to shield. And for the first time, that felt like peace.